Okay. Let's read 21 through 25.
For although they knew God, they neither...
I'm sorry, 18 to 21.
All right, back up. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so the people are without excuse.
Okay.
No excuses.
Huh?
No excuses.
What question are we asking?
What is no?
Purpose for faith, I think, isn't it?
Well,
I think we defined grace.
That's the last one I have. It's like
Yeah.
finish six.
Paul's
everybody
purpose.
told you question 6 and first. That's week. I'm just seeing if you were listening.
Well, we might have been listening, but who can remember that?
Okay, define grace.
Unmerited favor.
Unmerited favor. Faith is unmerited favor. In other words, you have been given something that you did not earn, you do not have any right to, you have no inheritance toward, and nobody's obligated to provide. It is given to you totally and completely without strings attached and with full freedom. It cost you nothing. What did you do to earn your salvation? Nothing. It was all provided for you at the cross. It was a free gift of God, and it was a gift of grace. Name some other gifts of grace that we receive on a regular basis. See, grace is a lot bigger than just salvation. Here's a term, we're given dying grace. The people who were burned at the stake during the persecutions would preach would preach Jesus Christ from the stake through the flames without any indication that there might have been pain or suffering of any kind. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people who viewed that ended up becoming Christians because they saw power. They saw a power in those lives, able to die with dignity, even in a flaming pile of wood. And they didn't seem to have any pain whatsoever. They were given, the Colosseums were supposed to be a big spectacle, and they turned the lions loose. But the lions would tear the criminals apart that were staked out there, but they wouldn't touch the Christians. Josephus and Philo and all those guys documented that the lions had nothing to do with the Christians. The gladiators had to go out and kill them with a sword, and so they died quickly and they died fairly painlessly. And they would stand they would stand tied to the stakes or the poles in the middle of the Colosseum and tell the crowds about Jesus Christ, and the crowd saw power in that. They were given dying grace, while the criminals died screaming and in great torment. Okay. Breakfast every Saturday morning is a gift of grace. Now, I don't want you to look at me like I'm Jesus, okay? But the bottom line is, I don't charge for it. I don't expect you to give me anything for it. You come expecting it, you get it, you eat it, and hopefully it's edible most of the time. And it's a gift of grace. I mean, there's no obligation whatsoever to come in, sit down, eat, be done. Going to church is a gift of grace. We do pay our pastor, and we do pay the bills, but to come here and sit down, there's no obligation whatsoever. Now, God gives us urgings to put money in the offering plate, but you've never heard Rob preach one sermon about money. He ought to preach more about it, because it is in the Bible, about tithing and the benefits of it and whatever. He ought to preach more about it, but I've never heard him in 10 years, I've never heard him say one word about money from the pulpit. Okay? So, to come to church here and sit on the pew and be taught is a gift of grace. Nobody charges anything or twists your arm. It's not quite the same on the, to get your teaching from the TV evangelists, because half the show's about send me money and a guilt trip associated with it. But here, it's a gift of grace. It's free, and there's no obligation or charge for it whatsoever. Okay? Can you think of any more?
The fact that every day is new. You got another chance, a new
Yes.
renewing every day.
Right. There's no consequence for yesterday. If you totally mess up yesterday, he still loves you just as much today. Now, there may be discipline involved to help you not have another yesterday.
Right.
But it's not a mean discipline. It's not being strapped to the post and flogged. It's the Holy Spirit. And you can make a discipline as easy or as hard as you want it to be, simply by being stubborn or be yielding. It's up to you. God doesn't want to discipline you. We make him do it. Don't we? Huh? So, it's a free gift to God. What was Paul's purpose for visiting Rome?
To give them a spiritual gift.
To give them a spiritual gift. The Romans had all the material gifts they needed. Rome was very, very prosperous at this point in time, almost too prosperous. They had multiple houses, one on the beach and one up in the city somewhere. The poorest guy in Rome was very well taken care of. Wasn't that way out in Jerusalem and out in the far reaches of the Roman Empire, but in Rome, it was a luxurious place to live. And the Colosseums and the meals at the Colosseums when you went, there was free bread, free stuff was passed around. It was like our Colosseums today, the football stadiums or whatever. We have to pay for the hot dogs, but in Rome you didn't. You went, you ate, you enjoyed the show, whatever it was, and it was free. So they had a good life. He wanted to come give them a spiritual gift. He wanted to give them something from God. He wanted to give them teaching. He wanted to expand their life spiritually. So that's why he wanted to come. Yes? You look like you're...
No, I was just laughing. You were talking about Rome, and all I could think of is when in Rome. And recently they had when in Rome have a snowball fight because they had snow for the first time in 6 years. So it was just kind of, comical.
Yeah. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Well, I guess the closest thing we have to that now is what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You know, because it was a very, very immoral place on top of it. So he wanted to give them the spiritual gift that would help them to deal with the immorality that was all around them. Rome was quickly becoming what America is becoming today. A lot of homosexuality, and it was sanctioned by the government, and all the houses across it. We're beginning to license all of our immorality. Have you noticed?
Yep.
We've licensed alcohol. We've licensed marijuana now. In certain cities, prostitution is licensed, and it's they license it to protect us from bad product, right?
Yeah.
No,
Why do they license it then?
so they can get their cut out of it.
Yeah.
It's all about money.
Colorado got
Food
$37 million in taxes the first year they brought marijuana in. $37 million in taxes. And they're destroying the brains of their citizens.
They can't pay for enough cops.
Huh?
They aren't gonna be able to pay for enough cops to keep the idiots
Oh, no.
off the road.
Oh, well, they don't talk about that side of it, but Focus on the Family says that their rehab centers and their homeless shelters have tripled. And all that's costing the government money. All right.
Pretty soon they'll be making that money up from somewhere else, because just like, the casino going in was supposed to pay for all of our school books and all that kind of stuff, and it was gonna be so wonderful. Well, last year, Orleans started having to pay for part of their school books again already.
They had a contract, and the contract was up. is
Yeah,
what-
but
yeah.
I mean, you know, if it was
That's
so,
why
such
they
a
have
good
contract.
thing, they would have continued, you know, done some kind of a continuation.
And Valley lost 2 teachers either this year or the year before.
Well,
Because
yeah,
they couldn't
both
afford to
years,
pay
they
for
can't
it.
afford to pay for them.
Yep. Yeah, you know, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul.
They say it's all gonna be good, and it's all gonna be, they make it look so wonderful.
Might
Well,
be
that's
for a
how they
little-
sell it.
Might be for a little bit, but
Yeah.
nothing ever lasts.
Well, I know those two teachers retired, and they just didn't replace
And
them all the way.
basically, as far as I can see, the only thing we got out of it was some new street lights.
I think they were pressured to retire.
No, actually, the one wasn't, because I know him, he's a board member, and he decided to retire, and he's actually working now as a historian over at the hotel, so it's
Yeah.
just, it worked out perfect for him.
Okay, so we want to, what is the meaning of verse 16? I am not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes, first to the Jews and then to the Gentiles. What's being said there? Why first to the Jews and then to the Gentiles? Are we second-class citizens?
As long as we're citizens, I don't care. As long as we're citizens, I don't care.
Because the Jews are God's chosen people.
The Jews were chosen to bring salvation to the world, not just to bring the Messiah to the world.
Yeah, but they messed it all up,
Yeah.
so.
The Messiah was supposed to
Just like me, I messed stuff up.
come, just like, Jesus came, they were supposed to embrace him as the Messiah, and they were supposed to take the message, the whole Jewish nation was supposed to take the message to the whole world. And they totally messed it up. Did they mess it up for eternity? I mean, is it totally messed up and they're out of the picture?
No.
No, but they had the first shot at it, first to the Jews. And they were supposed to go out and evangelize the whole world. Do you think they'll ever make up for that? We studied Revelation. Do you think they'll ever make up for
Yeah,
that?
they will.
Yeah, when will they make up for it?
Next time around.
Next time
Next
around.
time around.
No, before
He
that.
comes back.
Before that.
It's after is it the 4?
Remember the 144,000?
Oh.
And there's 12,000 from each tribe, and they will suddenly see the truth that the Messiah has come.
Now, wait a minute. The Jehovah's Witness says that that's all that's going to heaven, 144,000, and
Their church is an Indian,
it ain't got no windows in it.
No!
That's what they believe.
I know that's what they believe. But that just stays kind of in their walls. Nobody else believes that. And they're falling away from that because, they've gotten so big now. Everybody is saying, well,
Why am I doing all
we
this
got
crap
19
if I'm not
million
going to heaven?
people. I thought I was going to be one of the 144,000. Well, and they're starting to revise their theology on the
If you pay more money,
144,000.
you can get me.
Because until they got to 144,000,
By your way.
Yeah, that's the way it is. You have to almost buy your way in. You gotta get to these certain levels of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's-
Well, they're trying to back off of that because people were saying, hey, wait a minute, the math's not adding up. Okay? Well, the bottom line is, the 144,000 are Jews, and they're gonna go out and evangelize the world because they're gonna get a second chance. And 144,000 of them's gonna do it, and there's gonna be a huge revival right in the middle of Revelation at the 3.5 years. A huge revival. And it's gonna be led by the Jews, and it's gonna be far more successful than anything Billy Graham ever thought about. Because there's a concept in the Bible that says there's nobody better for the job than the guy God chose. And he never chooses the guy never chooses the guy that's qualified. When Moses was coming along, he said, I want this in the temple, and I want this metal work, and I want everything covered with gold, and I want great tapestries.
Now we're talking about Catholic.
And Moses said, I got a bunch of sheep herders and bricklayers here. Well, how am I supposed to do all that? And God said, I do not call the qualified, I qualify who I call. And some of the greatest artistic work known to mankind has come out of the Jewish nation. The Muslim nation hasn't given us anything, but the Jews have given us great symphonies, they've given us great art, they've given us great architecture, they've given us many, many things that God has qualified them to do. They just didn't give us the Savior. They provided him, but they didn't support him except for the 12 apostles and the ones that followed them. They're going to get a second chance, and it's going to be the 144,000. And finally, when the right people have it, with the right foundation and the right background, it's going to evangelize the world. It's going to be a huge revival for that last 3.5 years. Okay. What examples can be given to substantiate verse 20? Verse 20 says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. These are examples of how that's true.
People that are out, tribes that are out in the middle of nowhere can see his glory in, the trees, the plants, that gives them life. They don't exactly know the story, but they can see his glory in everything.
There are no atheists in a primitive camp in the Amazon. They worship. They worship what they can see around them. They know that they don't have lambs like Israel did, but they have monkeys, and they see provision and food, and they use the monkey bones to make tools out of, and the hides to, they did. The Indians had the great white buffalo, and the buffalo gave them coats to wear and blankets to sleep under and food to eat, and the bones were used to make spear points and to make digging tools and to make needles to punch the leather to stitch them up. And they worshiped because they saw God's provision in the buffalo. They saw God's protection in the rivers, because if the enemy was coming across the river in the Amazon, he had all kinds of time to shoot darts and arrows at them and kill them before they could get to the other side. And the rivers in South America are fast and cruel. They're also, if you have canoes, they're also transportation. And they saw all in that they saw God. What do you also find in those same exact villages when you open them up and get to them and start to study them? You not only see the worship of God through the creation that's around them, you see other things. You see one other thing too.
evil, like Satan.
You saw your witch doctors, and you see voodoo, and you see satanic worship. Satan's there too, and he's there trying to pull the people who are worshiping what they know about God away from that and pull them into the dark religions, the Satanism. You go to Haiti, and you see the worship in the tribes, you see the worship of the elements around them, but you also see voodoo. It's there. You go out into the Indians on the prairie before civilization came. You found the worship of the buffalo, the worship of the river, the worship of the sun, but you also saw the witch doctors. Okay, and they were doing the evil arts. There was this tug of war within the village as to which way they would go. It's the exact same thing as in America, where we say we're civilized, but we're still being pulled between the world and the Bible. We have the Bible, but we also have the struggle, because Satan wants to pull us off, and he wants to change it just enough to control our lives. And so nothing's changed. But men are without excuse. Atheists like to play the game. I started to send you something this week, but it's kind of crude. I'll clean it up a little bit. But you can put the S word in where it belongs, okay?
We've never heard that.
There, huh?
We've never heard that.
Well, there was an atheist sitting on an airplane. He was sitting beside a little girl, and he said, little girl, would you like to make the trip a little shorter and talk about something? And the little girl said, sure, what do you want to talk about? He's a little 8, 9, 10-year-old girl. And he said, well, let's talk about why there's no God, talk about death, and why there's no life after death. The little girl said, fine. She said, but can I ask you a question first? He said, sure. He said, well, a deer, a cow, and a horse all eat the same thing, grass. But when a deer excretes, he leaves little round pellets, and when a cow excretes, he leaves a round pile, a patty, and when a horse excretes, he leaves clumps. He said, what do you suppose that is? The atheist thought about it a while and said, well, I guess I don't really know. He said, would you really feel qualified to talk about God if you don't know crap? Really good point. Why do atheists want to talk about God so much?
For attention.
You know, I don't talk about things that don't exist. I don't debate unicorns with anybody, hardly ever.
Hardly ever.
But methinks they're making so much noise because maybe they're trying to convince themselves. You know, we don't spend any time, we don't waste any part of our lives talking about orcs. You know, we talk about symbolism a little bit and about, you know, those are great books. They're great books. But we don't spend a whole lot of time, or you know, anything else that's mystical.
Jackalopes.
They're cute and they're funny and we laugh about them, but
I still think they are.
I have never booked a hunt with a guide to hunt a jackalope, you know. None of my money goes that direction, and I don't ever make any long distance phone calls to see if anybody can get me on a hunt for them. We don't do that. But atheists spend their entire lives
How much money you got?
talking about God who doesn't exist. No. No, there's nothing about that plan that even makes any sense. All right. When we get to the bottom line and we get to the end of it, we're not going to have any excuse. We saw God in everything that was created. Do you know that the Bible was in the stars? There are 12 major constellations with 7 minor constellations in each one of the 12. And you have the whole Bible written up there. Remember in Genesis chapter 1, when he made the stars, he said they made them for our guides. Now, physically, we use the North Star and the South Star to point our ships in the right direction. But he was talking far more on the spiritual level than he was on the material level. Because the entire scripture is written in the stars. And if that book's still in print, I'm going to buy some of them and anybody wants to read it because it's a fabulous book. And it just opened it. You know, I know we have horoscopes and I know we have astrology, and that's Satan's version of it. But T.J. Kennedy preached a sermon one time, just scratch the surface of it. If you get the book and read it, it goes far deeper. But everything in the Bible is written in the stars for us to see. Why do you suppose ancient people who did not have the Bible like we do named a constellation the Virgin? God was speaking truth to them. And so they picked the Virgin. They picked the lion, Leo, because Jesus is the Lion of Judah. And they picked the Southern Cross. And the cross is our salvation. And I can go on and I can go on and I can go on. Everything that was created screams God. And when we get to the end of it, and when we stand before Jesus, whether we're saved or whether we're not, we're going to have no excuse. Because he was here and we could have acknowledged him, and we didn't. The most primitive people on earth sees God in all of creation. And if we choose wickedness instead, it's going to be our fault. It's going to be his. What are examples that can substantiate verse 20? We've already talked about that. What are the examples that can substantiate 22 and 23? Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of immortal men for images made to look like mortal men, birds, animals, reptiles. Some examples. What do we worship in lieu of God?
Money, baseball, basketball,
Football,
alcohol, food.
Our houses, our homes, our cars. Nobody ever goes to the dealership and buys a lesser car. You ever notice that? They don't trade in a Cadillac and buy a Chevy. They move from a Cadillac up. And I've done that my whole life. If I think back on it, my first truck didn't have a radio, had a gear shift, a steering wheel, and 3 pedals on the floor. And a cloth seat. Had a rubber mat on the bottom, and now every time I drive past, I look to see if there's a King Red sitting around anywhere. But I just won't look at it. I don't want to buy it, I just won't look at it.
Sure you don't want to buy it.
We always trade out. I started out with a metal fly rod, and then I went to a fiberglass, and then I went to a better fiberglass, and then I went to a cheap graphite, and then I went to a better graphite, and now I'm up to IMG8s.
And you got 5 of them.
And they're like 4 house payments a piece, you know? People don't leave a 3-bedroom house and go to a 2-bedroom house. I've never understood why 60, 70-year-old people want to build mansions after their kids are all gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, my wife said, "Boy, it'd be nice to have that." And I said, "Yeah, okay. Would you want to clean that?" Well, we could have a maid come in a couple of days. make it simpler. I want less yard to mow. Bigger garden, but yes, less yard to mow. I want less of a house to work on. I want a smaller roof to replace when it goes bad. I don't need 5 bedrooms anymore. Nobody ever comes visit me anyway. Why do I need 5 bedrooms?
Oh,
Well,
I do when the crops are right. I do when the crops are right.
Yeah. When the garden's in, Josh comes by and eats lunch 3 times a week, which is okay. I have plenty of stuff out there.
I so want to go by and see you out on all fours.
It happens.
It's amazing. He eats a couple apples, and 300 or 400 cherry tomatoes, and grab the bell pepper and munches it all the way to the truck and to wherever he's
Forget about
going.
the peas. That's good.
Stops by all the time.
Cucumbers last year at our house, he did.
You know, I grow about everything, but I can't grow a cucumber to save mine.
Really?
Okay. We worship a lot of stuff, and we've been working in a Catholic church for a couple of weeks. Statues everywhere. Statues everywhere, the Virgin Mary, and we had to go 30 foot up in the air and put new spotlights on the Virgin Mary to highlight her. And then there was on the other side, I think it was St. Vincent's, because the name of the church is St. Vincent's. So they got St. Vincent's on the left side of the speaker and the Virgin Mary on the right side. And they worshiped the Virgin Mary. Now, she was a good woman, and I don't want to demean her in any way, but she can't replace Jesus. I think we ought to give her all the credit she's due, because she was a great, great woman. And so were a lot of other women in the Bible. Esther and all those women. Sarah and all of them, they were great women, and they had a great impact on what we believed and getting their husbands to where they needed to be sometimes. Abraham gave Sarah away twice because he was afraid that Pharaoh might kill him and take her, and God protected her and sent her back to him. And can you imagine the reunion? Oh, Abraham, great man of faith. Yeah, you are. Where did that come from? You got God. Pharaoh? You know? Can you imagine that night? First night back with Sarah in the tent.
You should have slept with one eye open.
And he deserved every bit of it. I'm not saying she was wrong in any way. She should have backed him upside of the head with a sheep bone. But women have had a great impact on this whole path that we're on to get to heaven, and a lot of them did great things. So we'll start there next week, okay, and I'll bring you the outline for chapter 2.
What's that book you were saying?
The Gospel in the Sky.